Did you know that Harry Potter as a character is shockingly different between book and movie? Whether it be the color of his eyes, key lines that got stolen from him, or essential plot points that were totally rewritten, the main character of this wizarding world just isn't the same on the silver screen. And that's why over a year ago, I took on the task of finding every single difference between the books and movies. And in this video, we're going to take a look back at the Philosopher's Stone, and not just the Philosopher's Stone in general, but Harry specifically. A couple weeks ago, I posted part 1 of this analysis in which I covered every Harry-related change between chapters 1 and 10. And now in part 2 of this bonus episode, we're going to finish out the second half of the book and take a look at the climax of Harry's first year at Hogwarts. My name is Gibby and welcome to a bonus episode of my series Movies vs. Manuscripts. Like I said, this is the show where I find every single change, revision, and omission between the Harry Potter books and their film adaptations. As of the making of this video, I'm into the Goblet of Fire. So if you're new here, make sure to check out the series playlist, which is linked in the description, to binge watch all the episodes of Movies vs. Manuscripts, in which I point out more than just the changes to Harry. Also, it isn't required, but if you haven't watched part 1, which came out 2 weeks ago, you should probably do that. As always, a big thank you to Jason, Joshua, Timothy, and the rest of my incredible Patreon supporters who help make videos like this possible every month. And now with all that being said, we can jump right into the changes. Typically, I go through every change across the 4 major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But in part 1, I already covered the first 3 categories. So jumping right back into the plot changes where we left off, we're gonna pick up after the trio and Neville's close call with Fluffy the 3-headed dog. And the next change we have brings us into chapter 11, which is all about Quidditch. As you'll soon see, I try my best not to leave anything out, so we cover every change small to large, and one of those small changes is the fact that the movie doesn't give us the full details of Harry's first practice with Oliver Wood. In the movie, we simply see them walk out and talk briefly about the game, but in the book, we have this whole chapter devoted to Quidditch, so we learn a bit more. Specifically, we learn that Harry and Wood practiced at 7 p.m. and Wood threw golf balls around in the air, making Harry dart after them to catch them. They don't actually practice with the snitch. And one of the cool details we learn, which shows Harry's skill, is the fact that he doesn't drop a single golf ball during their first practice. Another change the movie made regarding this practice is the fact that Harry doesn't hit a bludger through anything, and Oliver never compliments him about potentially being a good beater. I'm not sure why they threw in random lines like this, because Harry is a really good seeker. Just keep the actual practice we read about in the book instead of cutting it to add random moments like him hitting the bludger. Anyway, moving on to later in the chapter, we have Harry's first Quidditch match. And there are 4 distinct changes regarding this crucial game, which nearly throws Harry off his broom. First, there's a difference in strategy for the first game, which is the fact that Harry flies around constantly looking for the snitch. In the movie, he flies high in the air and just sits still watching everything. To be honest, I'm gonna guess this was because they couldn't have constant flying sequences in the film, too much CGI probably, so they needed him to be still. Or maybe they just didn't think it through. I don't know. Next, continuing on with this sitting still thing, the snitch doesn't just fly in front of Harry's face, bringing him back to reality. Okay, let me be a little harsh here for a moment and vent my feelings about this Quidditch match. This is utterly ridiculous. Harry sits mid-air, not moving an inch, and just reacts to the game with some weird faces. Then the snitch just so happens to fly in front of him? Yeah, right. The whole point of the snitch is that it's hard to see and even harder to catch. It doesn't just fly in front of people like, hey, did you forget your job? But anyway, thanks for letting me rant there for a second, I feel a lot better now. Next up in the game, we have another change, but this time regarding Harry's broom acting up. In the book, it actually starts to go haywire after Marcus Flint's foul, which by the way wasn't on Oliver Wood, it was on Harry. While chasing the snitch, Flint flies directly in front of Harry, causing him to get knocked off of his broom, leaving him hanging on for dear life. Then, similarly to the movie, once Hermione interferes with the curse on the broom, Harry can climb back on top. But that brings us to the final change of chapter 11 and this Quidditch match, which is that Harry doesn't do a side-by-side dive with the Slytherin Seeker and then nearly swallow the snitch as he falls off his broom. In the book, he simply gets back on his broom, begins to dive, clamps his hands to his mouth as he eats the snitch, and then hits the ground and coughs it up. He does not stand on top of the broom as he is flying and then fall off, causing him to eat the snitch. I'm not even sure if it's possible to stand on the broom while it's flying anyway. But now with chapter 11 wrapped up, we can head into our next chapter, which contains 4 more Harry-related changes. And this chapter is all about the Mirror of Erised. The first change in chapter 12 is that the circumstances under which Harry finds the room with the mirror are slightly different. Yes, Harry nearly gets caught in the restricted section of the library, but in the movie they show him running into the hall to see Snape confronting Quirrell. Snape then reaches out and nearly grabs the invisibility cloak off of Harry in the movie. This is a combination of two moments in the book. Snape does confront Quirrell, but in a completely different chapter. In this part of the book, Filch runs outside and just so happens to run into Snape, and then he tells Snape about what he found and heard in the restricted section. Harry then runs from Filch and Snape and finds his way into the room with the Mirror of Erised. Next, Harry sees more than just his parents in the mirror. In fact, he sees more than 10 people, all a part of his extended family. He sees his grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, and more. This is a crucial part of the book as it really emphasizes Harry's greatest desire, which is to have a family, not just to have his parents back, but to truly have a family. Better than the Dursleys, at least. I really wish we could have seen this in the movie, but I get why they did this. After analyzing lots of film adaptations so far on my channel, I've realized that movies will always take the simple route. They usually treat the viewer like they're dumb and can't handle more than one complex thought at a time, so they simplify things as much as possible. Book shows the whole family? Well, then the movie's just going to show his parents, who are the only ones that really matter to the story itself. And speaking of dumbing things down, our next change brings up an omitted moment from the book in which Ron sees the mirror for the first time. In the movie, it's a simple moment where Ron tells Harry what he sees, and then Harry depressingly reminds Ron that his parents are dead. But in the book, things get a little more heated as the boys argue over who gets to look into the mirror. After Ron doesn't see Harry's parents, Harry wants to bring them back by looking into the mirror himself. But Ron doesn't want to move. Honestly, this might be the most realistic part of the book in terms of them acting their age as they start to shove each other because they don't want to share. To be honest, I'm fine with this being cut from the movie as it isn't completely necessary. However, there are a few key Ron changes connected to the Mirror of Erised that I can't get into today, because this video isn't about Ron. But if you haven't watched it already, I'd highly recommend you checking out Season 1 of my Harry Potter analysis to see all the crazy things they did to Ron during these scenes. Anyway, moving on to the last change in Chapter 12, we have a short moment between Dumbledore and Harry, but in the movie it's even shorter. There's a bit of a conversation in the book which contains some dialogue about what Dumbledore sees in the mirror. Harry asks him, and Dumbledore replies that he sees himself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. Harry isn't sure if Dumbledore is lying about this or not, but he doesn't press him on it. To be honest, Harry is just getting to know Dumbledore in this first book, but if this happened a few years later, Harry would have known that Dumbledore was telling the truth. It is a very Dumbledore-type thing to have your greatest desire be a pair of thick socks. But now let's head into Chapter 13, which only contains one change, but it's a pretty big one, and that is Harry's discovery of Nicholas Flamel. That's right, Harry's discovery, not Hermione's. There are many times throughout the entire movie series in which Hermione gets credit for many of the boys' greatest moments, and this is one of the first. If you remember from part 1 of these changes, I mentioned how on the Hogwarts Express, Harry reads Dumbledore's chocolate frog card and it mentions the name Nicholas Flamel, which doesn't get shown in the movie version of the train scene. Well, these events are months apart, so Harry had forgotten this name, but Hagrid mentioned it when they visited him. After having no luck figuring out who Flamel is, Harry randomly gets another Dumbledore chocolate frog card and once again sees the name Nicholas Flamel on the back. This is the crucial clue they needed to then piece together who this alchemist is and how he's involved with Dumbledore, and ultimately it brings them to the conclusion that the Philosopher's Stone is hidden in the castle. So even though it's the only Harry change in this chapter, it might be the most important one in the entire book and movie. But we can't stop there because we still have the rest of Harry's year at Hogwarts and the climax of Voldemort's big reveal. Next, we have Chapter 14, which is titled Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback. Now there's a big issue here, and that is the fact that I don't have the time to cover this entire chapter in today's video, but essentially the whole thing is one massive omission. To summarize, in the book, Harry, Ron, and Hermione actually smuggle Norbert, Hagrid's dragon, out of the castle. This is highly illegal, breaks about a dozen school rules, and in the process, Harry loses his invisibility cloak. So it's a pretty big moment. Plus, Draco tries to catch Harry doing this and ends up getting caught in the process himself. This is what leads to the trio and Draco's detention with Hagrid in the Forbidden Forest, which, by the way, Neville is a part of. If you want the full breakdown of the entire chapter, feel free to check out Season 1 of Movies vs. Manuscripts Harry Potter Edition. But anyway, let's head into Chapter 15 now. First up in this chapter, we have a crucial change regarding another discovery Harry makes, and that is the fact that he doesn't see Snape's bloody leg after the troll attack. In the book, Harry happens upon this information in a completely different way, which provides provides more context to the story. We read that after having his Quidditch Through the Ages book confiscated from him, Harry was determined to get it back. So he went to the staff room with hopes of reclaiming this book. But when he reached the staff room, he cracked the door to see Filch tending to Snape's mangled leg. He overhears the two adults talking, and specifically he hears Snape say, "How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all three heads?" As we know from the movie, after the troll attack, they just show a quick moment of Harry looking down at Snape's bloody leg, and then Snape covering it up. And that's it. Harry and the others are then left to piece together the information, but as you can see in the book, it's quite clear that Snape encountered Fluffy based on his own conversation with Filch. Next, the book finally gets to their detention in the Forbidden Forest with Draco, and there are a couple changes that occur in these pages. The first of which being the fact that Neville is with them for this, and originally gets paired with Draco. It's only after Draco scares Neville that Hagrid switches them up and Harry gets paired with him. Also, for the next change, there's a very important moment after Harry's close call with the cloaked figure in the forest, but it got entirely removed. You see, in the movie, we only see Firenze the Centaur save Harry, and then shortly after, Hagrid and the others run up. But in the book, Firenze actually puts Harry on his back and takes him to Hagrid. Along the way, Firenze runs into two other centaurs, Ronan and Bane, and they are appalled at the fact that Harry is riding Firenze. They have a brief conversation that introduces us to the complicated politics of centaurs and wizards, and this is just the beginning of this subplot that will run through the entire series, as these centaurs will come up again in Harry's later years. But sadly, we never got to see them in the movie. Finally, the last change in Chapter 15 is small, but one that I must mention nonetheless, and that is that Harry's invisibility cloak is returned to him that night after detention. Along with the cloak is a note that says, "just in case." Of course, in the movie, he never loses his cloak because they never smuggle Norbert the Dragon out of the castle. And with that, we've come to our penultimate chapter, which brings our trio into the labyrinth of puzzles, traps, and games that they must complete in order to reach the Philosopher's Stone. In Chapter 16, there are quite a few changes regarding Harry, and in Chapter 17 there are even more, so buckle up as we finish up Harry's first year at school with a bang. First up, there's a small change in location as Harry's epiphany about Hagrid's accidental betrayal happens down by the lake after exams, not while walking through the courtyard and seeing Hagrid playing the flute. Next, in the movie, we see the trio go straight to McGonagall after realizing that the Philosopher's Stone has been compromised, but in the book, they don't go to her first. They actually attempt to find Dumbledore, but it's only after some searching that Harry realizes they have no idea where his office is located. They then run into McGonagall and try to inform her of the issue. After this, we miss out on an important character building moment from the book, and that is when Harry gives an impassioned speech to Ron and Hermione about how they must save the Philosopher's Stone. Hermione and Ron really don't know what to do, and don't feel like they can help. But Harry steps up and tells them about how exams, house points, and getting expelled won't matter if Voldemort returns. He tells them how Voldemort killed his parents, and he won't sit by as he attempts to return to power. It's only after this speech that his friends are convinced and they make up their minds to go after the stone. Which brings us to their first obstacle, and that is Fluffy. In the movie, there's a harp that is bewitched to put Fluffy to sleep. But in the book, Harry had actually received a flute from Hagrid for Christmas, and he brings this with him. When they arrive to Fluffy's room, the dog is active and awake, and sniffs for them as they're under the invisibility cloak. So the trio take turns playing the flute to lure the dog to sleep as they jump down one by one through the trapdoor. Next, there's a change with another obstacle, and that is the flying key. In the movie, Harry gets on a broom and goes after the key alone, but in the book, all three of them grab brooms and chase the key together. And finally, the last change in this chapter is yet another change with an obstacle, and that is Snape's potion riddle. Really, the change here is the omission of the potion riddle altogether, which Hermione masterminds and figures out. But I'm counting it as a Harry change since it's another obstacle Harry had to get through that wasn't included in the movie. Essentially, there was a table with multiple potions on it, and a piece of paper with a riddle. The riddle would tell you which potion to drink to get through the next door, but some of the other potions were dangerous. Hermione was the one who figured out the riddle, but she gave the potion to Harry to drink so he could be the one to move on and finish out the adventure. And on that note, we come to the final chapter of changes, which is the climax of the entire story. and that is Harry's encounter with Quirrell-de-Mort. Again, I highly encourage you to check out the full episodes on my channel, which cover all of these chapters and scenes in way more detail, as I can't go through every page of the book today cause that would take forever. But as for the key changes to Harry, we have quite a few in this last chapter. To start, I bet you didn't know that Quirrell actually used a spell to tie up Harry with ropes when he entered the room. The movie of course removed this entirely, but the book is a little more intense about their interaction. After Voldemort is revealed, we have another change, which is that Voldemort tells Harry he'll die like his parents if he doesn't hand over the stone. Again, it's a little bit more intense than the movie version, which actually is the opposite, as Voldemort bribes Harry by saying he'll bring his parents back if he gives him the stone. And speaking of dying in the same way as his parents, Quirrell does actually try to kill Harry with the killing curse, which is our next change. In the movie, Quirrell just lunges forward and tries to choke him, but in the book he begins to say the killing curse with his wand out and is only stopped by Harry lunging at him and grabbing his face. This is when Harry realizes that he must hold on to Quirrell to keep him in pain. And by the way, this causes Harry pain as well, not just Quirrell. But he continues to hold on until he passes out. And that brings us to the next change, which is that as Harry passes out, he hears another voice, which sounds like the voice of Dumbledore shouting his name. In the movie, he doesn't hear any voice, and he passes out after the spirit of Voldemort flies through him. In the book, though, he passes out due to the sheer amount of pain he caused himself by touching Moldy Voldy. Next, as Harry wakes up in the hospital wing, his reaction to what he just went through is a lot more realistic in the book. In the movie, he sits up and stares at the presents by his bed and smiles, which is a little bit of an odd reaction after his first near-death experience. In the book, it's a lot more realistic as Harry jolts up out of his sleep and exclaims that Voldemort has the stone. Remember, in the book, Harry passed out before seeing Quirrell disintegrate, so he doesn't know what happened to the stone or Voldemort. Dumbledore then has to come in and calm Harry down and reassure him that Voldemort didn't get the stone. It's only after this that Harry feels a bit better. Also, in this final conversation with Dumbledore, there are a couple omitted moments. First, Harry finds out who sent him the invisibility cloak as Dumbledore tells him that it was his father's. And Dumbledore was not only the one who gave it to him on Christmas, but returned it to him after Harry lost it. And the second omitted part of the conversation is when Harry asks Dumbledore about Snape hating his father. Dumbledore explains a bit about their rivalry and then says that James Potter saved Snape's life, which Snape has never recovered from. Of course, Harry doesn't learn the full story of that incident until later on in the series. And finally, to wrap up all the Harry Potter changes in the Philosopher's Stone, our last change is that Harry independently comes up with the idea to threaten Dudley with magic. That's right, our good boy Harry isn't so innocent after all. Hagrid isn't the one who suggests it like in the movie, but rather Harry himself tells Hermione and Ron that the Dursleys don't know he isn't allowed to do magic, and so he'll probably use that to his advantage. And that is where the book and movie end. And with that, so do our changes. Thanks so much for tuning in to this two-part bonus episode of Movies vs. Manuscripts Harry Potter Edition. I hope after this you'll check out the full series, which you can binge watch on my channel right now using the playlist that I've got over there. Right now we're in the Goblet of Fire and things are just starting to heat up, so catch up on episodes you've missed and tune in every other week to follow along with the adventure. Plus, if you like Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, I've got videos on those movies as well. So if you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and click that bell icon to stay notified every single week. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.